Greetings to Southside. It's Kim Hammond here, all the way from Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia. I'm in my front yard. It's beautiful, coming into spring, and one of my favourite places. We live on a park, and just sending you great love from Melbourne. I so honoured today to be able to speak to you for my dear friend Cam Roxburgh. I love Cam, and really count him as a dear friend. Worked with him for 15 years in the Forge network, and I've been to your church. I had a wonderful time there for a Forge Canada event, and can't wait to get back to Vancouver. I love Whistler, so just really honoured today to talk about the last week of this series on Subversive Sabbath. I love this book. You can see it's well weathered, and talking about Sabbath and discipleship, and specifically about the need for recognizing that you cannot apprentice in Jesus and ignore the Sabbath. It's where trust is developed. And so I want to chat to you about that today. You know, I grew up as a Catholic, and when I did my first Holy Communion, my father gave me a picture of Jesus, and it was this piercing blue eyes, this kind of Hollywood Anglo locks of hair, and there was this kind of lamb over Jesus's arm. Looked like he'd kind of broken its neck, and he had this long staff, and he looked at you, you know, and had this kind of Catholic Star Trek symbol, and it was incredibly unrelatable. And I remember I used to put it in my bedroom as a kid and look at it and think Jesus, his eyes would follow me. And we have these images of Jesus. The church has always had them. Christians have always had them, that sometimes are unfollowable. But one thing I love about Subversive Sabbath and about this idea of how do we follow in Jesus' footsteps, that he took Sabbath very seriously and that he set a model for us to follow him. We live in this over-information, crazy world where we're overstimulated with our screens. Kids are born with an iPhone in their hand. They know how to use technology in ways that we've forgotten and don't even know how to use. And so we are always busy. I remember as a kid I used to watch the Jetsons, and I think, man, I can't wait till you can take a whole meal in a tablet or have a jetpack. But actually, technology has not made us more efficient. It has made us busier in our lives. One of the challenges from me, from one of my favourite writers is Dallas Willard. He says we've got to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our life. John Mark Comer in, I think, Portland or Seattle has been talking about how do we create the kind of Sabbath and rhythms in our life. And this is exactly what Subversive Sabbath talks about. How do we develop these kind of habits and rhythms that help us have very healthy lives? What does God teach us about Sabbath? It's a great question in this final chapter on Sabbath and discipleship, chapter 12. You know, this idea of, did God rest because he was tired? Rabbis have been arguing about this for centuries. Did he need to rest? Or did he finish creation in 6 days and was like, whew, I am exhausted. I'm just going to take a me day. I don't think so. I think the author of Subversive Sabbath is right. He did it out of love. He did it because he created us out of love and out of relationship. And he wasn't needy. He wanted to show love. And I think we see a God who does not just tell us to rest without doing it first himself. God is no hypocrite, on page 191. I think this is a great quote. It's true. Everything God modeled from the beginning of time is something that we can practice in our lives. And in a busy world, silence, slowing down, space is uncomfortable. I never forget, we did an exercise a few years ago, and one of my pastors got us to go off into rooms and to spend some time alone with God, and then to come out after 10 minutes and to report back what God had spoken to us. And I was in an office that had no clock. And you know when you start to really still yourself, you begin to slow down, you're just alone with your thoughts. And I can remember after 2 minutes, I burst out of the room and said, "Is the time up?" I've not always been very good at slowing down. Sabbath for me has forced me to create some rhythms in my life that are not natural. I'm naturally a go-getter. I'm naturally a person that, works very hard and loves people and I'm an extrovert. I can talk underwater with marbles in my mouth. But something about Sabbath creates habits and rhythms for our soul. I really do love this. It's about building trust and having self-reflection with how we're going with God. It's about a rhythm of repentance and refocusing on our communion with God. And where do we get to do that? Very often. How often in our life are we encouraged to have the kind of rhythms that will reorientate us around our walk with Jesus? And not just a to-do list of prayers where we're asking for his blessing over several things, but actually a communal relationship where he talks and we listen, where we talk and he responds and listens, where we sense his love and forgiveness, where he reveals part to us, things we need to work on, how we are as a parent, how we are as a spouse, how we are as a worker and a neighbour. All of these things of life coming together are the richness of Sabbath. We've just been studying the book of Psalms, and one thing that's incredible about Psalms 23 is that it says in Psalms 23, he makes me lie down. Has there ever been a time in your life where you felt like God has used a situation, not caused it, but used it as an opportunity for you to slow down? There are times that he does make us lie down, and we need to embrace those times. In 2010, I moved to America, and I took a job in Chicago at a church. And a month after we got there, my son was diagnosed with leukemia. And it was a shocking revelation to see my little boy, who was 7 years old, just be so sick. And I thought for sure we were going to be moving home. But it was incredibly tough time of just reflection and agony and pain, lots of hospital visits. But for me, it was also a time to press into God and press into my relationship with my wife. I had this new job. I didn't have any holiday pay, no sick leave, and we had to get on with hospital and then seeing Forge expand across the states, hospital and in consulting this church, hospital and rhythms of family. And in some ways, it was like being on a missionary trip. We were just our nuclear family and meeting all new friends and lots of new rhythms. But in 2014, my son finished treatment and I was diagnosed with cancer. And I had written a book the previous years about our journey, and this book was coming out, and I had all these speaking engagements booked across the states, and I found myself in the very same hospital that my son had been treated. 2 cancers in the same family. My wife was devastated. And I remember lying in the hospital bed. I had another form of leukemia, very different to my son. They had us on the front page of the Chicago Hospitals magazine, just this unique father-son, both getting leukemia, different strains. I remember lying in bed and journaling and saying, okay, God, what is it that I can learn? This forced rest. I can't tour my book. I can't keep expanding Forge. I couldn't keep helping. All the things on my to-do list were put aside. And there was lots of soul searching. There is something about Sabbath that helps us create those kind of rhythms of soul searching, that we shouldn't have to wait for a crisis. Sometimes crisis does cause those things. Sometimes a change in job. Sometimes a moving of neighborhoods. Sometimes it's a crisis in relationships with friends, maybe within our own families. That sometimes we spend all our time focusing on the external, but there's something in those moments of asking, what are you trying to teach me here? What are the lessons? I don't think God gave my son cancer, nor me. I don't believe God is that kind of God. But I know he takes those moments of pain and tragedy and he teaches us how to trust him more. We learn a lot of lessons from them. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 9 to 14, we have this story where Jesus heals on the Sabbath. Let me read it to you. Reading from the NIV. Going out from the place, Matthew 12, 9 to 14. Going out from that place, he went into the synagogue. This was part of his normal rhythms. And a man with a shriveled hand was there, looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus. And they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you have a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not hold off it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore, it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath." And then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched out his hand. He stretched it out and he was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. So here's this incredible story. Jesus, as part of his rhythm as a Jew, he went to temple and he heals. And instead of seeing the good in the story, a bunch of religious people are deeply offended. It's interesting, they upset that Jesus is breaking the seventh commandment, but they don't mind breaking the fourth commandment. Here they are, not inspired, not moved towards more intimacy with God, but actually they're offended. I think this is really interesting, that religious rigidity often comes in the way of our faith. That often our upbringing or the experiences that we've had, where we've had bad experiences with church or with Christians, where we've either judged or been judged, where there's times that we've gossiped or been gossiped about. There are times that the very things that in our interacting with people affects us. And the fact that sometimes we make certain things absolutely non-negotiable, certain parts of our faith we find hard and we become incredibly argumentative about. You only have to look at Facebook to see this, that people become keyboard warriors about the left or the right. They become a particular issue. Politics, you see this all the time in North America and especially in the United States. This polarizing of evangelicalism, of what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus. You see this kind of camps, these boxes that we do. We put each other in. Christians do this all the time. Earlier on in the year, I went down to the Black Lives Matter march. Now, I have 3 sons. I have a 15-year-old who will probably skateboard past any moment, a 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. And my 15-year-old son's been asking lots of questions about what does it mean to stand for justice. We lived in Chicago for 5 years. We have lots of African-American friends, and we feel very deeply about this issue. And so COVID had just started. We really weren't on this side of COVID or what we understand now. It had just started, and these protests all around the world were happening. And so we didn't want our son catching public transport, and we talked about it as a family. Having both had cancer and low immune systems, we would wear masks and bathe in sanitizer and watch from a side street and keep really safe. But we wanted to stand in solidarity with this particular issue. We went down as a family, and it was an amazing experience, this peaceful protest, especially around our own Indigenous people. There are so many horrific injustices, the way that the Aboriginal people have been treated in Australia. And so for us, it was solidarity with our American friends, but it was also to do with how some of our Indigenous people have been treated. But I got to tell you, I had taken one photo and put it on my social media, and I got completely slammed by Christians over and over and over again, judged over and over again, sent videos and told that it was wrong and all sorts of issues. Now, you may or may not agree with the Black Lives Matter issues. The point I'm making is that it became a very left and right argument instead of about the way of Jesus. And I think we can make certain things left or right, but my heart here has been to follow the ways of Jesus. What does the Bible say about biblical justice? What are the things that we can obey? You know, so often we can get stuck on a particular issue of law. And I read this to my son in Isaiah 1:17. Look to do the right thing, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. This is right from the Bible. And so I don't want to get caught into the arguments of the left or the right. I want to keep following the way of Jesus. And I think Sabbath allows us to examine those things. Are we being drawn into arguments? Are we keyboard warring? Are we talking about the speck in someone else's eye, not the log in our own? Are we self-examining and asking the question, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? And that's the same for Sabbath. Through the centuries, people have become religious about it. Times in the church where it's been totally about the time and the exact no rest, just like the Pharisees are all about rest and not about working at all. Is it about the law of it, or is it about the heart of it? What does it mean to create great rhythms in our own life? And that's why I want to encourage you. Don't get drawn into the left or the right. Ask this question: what does it mean to follow Jesus and build trust with him, to commune with him, to be able to have conversations with him where he reveals issues of your soul? The rabbis believed that the Sabbath would be a time when your soul would be given extra soul. And maybe the Sabbath gives us good rhythms to examine our hearts and ask these hard questions. We must orientate ourselves towards grace instead of rule-based rest. I love that quote. If we're to follow in his steps, what does it mean to truly be a follower of him? As I get older, I'm not as old as some and younger than others, and I'm 46. I grew up in a very Pentecostal church, and in that church, certain things happened. There were certain theologies, and I just assumed they were all correct and right. And as I've got older, I began to examine them myself, and you swing in paradigms and you embrace different traditions. But as I've got older, I've began to go back to the Bible and ask this question: what does it mean for me to follow Jesus faithfully? What does it mean to have healthy rhythms of exercise and rest and Sabbath in my own life? And I really want to encourage you to think about your rhythms of kind of breathing in and breathing out. One of the things that we often talk about at our church is this missional rhythm called bless. Beginning each day in prayer, listening to others, eating with them, serving them, and then sharing our story. I know that you have your own rhythms at Southside. There's no magical rhythm. There's no one right way. There's no program or tick box. But it's about creating practices and rhythms. When I was a kid, I wanted to learn to juggle. And so a friend of mine was a bit of an actor and a comedian. He taught me, and it was through the practice of throwing balls in the air and learning to throw one up and throw another. And then the more that I did it, the more that I got it. And it's a practice that I can do anytime. If I haven't done it for a couple of years, I can pick up some mandarins or apples. It takes me a little while to get into that rhythm again. The more that I do it often, the better I am at it. The more often, the more frequent, the more that rhythm becomes a habit, and the habit becomes part of your character. And the character really informs who you are as a person. I want to encourage you as you think about your neighborhood, as you think about being the hands and feet of Jesus. Breathe in this rhythm of seeing Jesus speak to your soul. Breathe out a blessing over all those that you have contact with, that you get to be the hands and feet of Jesus. You're an incredible church, Southside. You're an incredible lighthouse. You are salt and light in the Vancouver region. I want to encourage you, as you continue to be more and more like Jesus, go deep. Go deep with God. Create the habits and the rhythms of Sabbath and rest that will draw you closer to him. He's so gentle and loving. He won't overwhelm us, but slowly reveal how we become more like him. I encourage you to make room. Create this as a great rhythm in your life. And then go deeper with each other. God always uses people, humans, to speak to each other. I love that this book emphasizes that God created these rhythms, not because he needed to rest out of exhaustion, but to model something to us, that we too need each other. We need to be the hands and the feet of Jesus to one another. And I encourage you to tell the stories, to share life, to laugh loud and laugh often, and to continue to make your life a living sacrifice to him. I hope you're encouraged by Subversive Sabbath. It's been a great study and a great book. I've enjoyed reading it again for today. And give my love to Cam, Michelle, and all of the church. God bless you. I just want to pray for your church. Father, I thank you for Southside. I thank you for its story, its heritage of faithfulness in its different neighbourhoods. And Father, I pray in the middle of COVID, as they have just come out of this summertime of study, that you will launch them, send them into their workplaces, their neighbourhoods, their play areas, where they work, live and play, that they continue to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Create great rhythms in each of their lives and in their communities together, that they may be drawn closer to you, that more of who you are is revealed to them, and they'll have stories of transformation where you are at work and we join you. We thank you for what you're doing in Vancouver and across the nation of Canada. Bless them, Father, in the mighty name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. God bless you.